It is 13:15, and the relentless, freezing rain is slowly drowning your children's only hope of survival.
You stand in the suffocating downpour of May 1315. The icy black mud sucks violently at your bare, shivering feet as you watch the king's men load their heavy wooden carts. By royal decree, they are legally seizing your village's absolute last sacks of dry grain to feed a distant, unseen army. Tears stream down the exhausted faces of the women standing beside you in the flooded road. You retreat into the dark, damp shadows of your wattle-and-daub hut, your cracked hands shaking from the cold. Up the muddy hill, the manor maids are currently blistering their raw fingers scrubbing massive iron roasting spits in 1315. They are psychologically tortured by the rich, inaccessible smell of pork, forced to watch the Lord feed roasted meat scraps to his hunting hounds, while you starve just a mile away. You overhear that King Edward's court is eating lavish feasts of swan in 1315. A sickening truth you must swallow as you kneel by your cold hearth. You scrub your family's fragile wooden bowls with coarse river sand until your knuckles split and bleed. You scrub frantically, desperately trying to mask the gag-inducing rancid stench of the rotting fish heads you were forced to boil for Sunday supper. The agonizing, chorus-like wails of hungry babies echo endlessly through the village's thin thatch roofs in the dead of the 1315 night. Your own stomach cramps violently against your ribs. The local midwife sits paralyzed in the hut next door, her spirit entirely broken by her absolute inability to soothe the crying infants. The once lively 1315 market is replaced by a terrifying silence. Walking through the square, you can only hear the chattering teeth of exhausted mothers staring blankly at empty woven baskets. The trap finally closes. The cruel 1315 statute of laborers is read aloud in the mud, its harsh words threatening you with legal imprisonment if you dare leave this flooded parish to beg for your children. To survive the elements, you carefully patch your child's thin leather shoes with dried river reeds in the dim light of 1315. You are terrified that if her fragile feet touch the freezing rain, a quiet, deadly fever will instantly follow. Every single night, you wrap your emaciated body around your youngest child. You willingly drain your fading body heat to fight off the freezing 1,315 dampness seeping up through the filthy dirt floor. The local bishop ruthlessly decrees in 1315 that this endless rain is a direct punishment for the peasant's sins, forcing you to endure agonizing, mandated fasts while your body withers. Adding insult to your misery, wealthy 1,315 pardoners splash past your home, demanding your precious few copper coins in exchange for false promises of heavenly warmth. The cruel 1315 manorial forest laws strictly forbid gathering wild food, so you endure the terrifying, stomach-churning anxiety of sneaking into the Lord's dark woods at midnight just to forage for wet chestnuts. You even throw your body over a tiny clay jar in 1315 to hide it from the dreaded salt tax collectors, knowing you desperately need that pinch of salt to preserve bitter roots. Inside your hut in 1316, the air hangs heavy with the suffocating smell of wet ash and black mold. An icy draft cuts deeply into your soaked wool dress as you try to spark damp wood. You seal your fragile wooden door shut with thick mud in 1316, paralyzed by hushed, terrifying rumors that desperate travelers have resorted to hunting unaccompanied children on the highways. By the bitter autumn of 1315, a suffocating despair crushes your chest when the roaring river ooze completely destroys the local mill. You stand knee-deep in the freezing sludge, clutching damp oats, realizing there is nowhere left to grind them. As the entire village harvest completely rots in the endless mud of 1316, you are forced under the threat of the whip to physically barricade the manor's overflowing stone granary. Your heart shatters into jagged pieces, listening to desperate, weeping mothers clawing at the iron gates outside. Despite the agonizing famine, the manor court heavily fines you in 1316 for failing to work the flooded fields, punishing you simply because your starving body collapsed in the mud. With wheat prices soaring far beyond reach in 1316, you painstakingly grind bitter acorns and toxic fern roots into a gritty gray paste. You cry silently as you watch it cause your children severe abdominal cramps. In the freezing spring of 1316, ruthless tithe collectors ignore the hollow eyes of your children, stripping you of your last basket of rotting cabbages. By late 1316, the village well tastes thickly of rust and decay, utterly contaminated by the flooded graveyard, forcing you to choke down stagnant ditch water. When the Lord demands his 1316 rent in silver rather than ruined crops, you endure the humiliation of selling your last laying hen to a sneering moneylender. Driven half-mad by the hollow cries of your family, you quietly trade your cherished silver wedding ring in 1316 for a tiny sack of rye. But as you eagerly open the sack in the dim firelight, you fall to your muddy knees, sobbing hysterically. Every single grain is blackened with toxic, mind-altering ergot fungus. There is no escape. A terrifying 1316. Folklore whispers that eating bread baked from ergot-infected rye invites demons into the blood. You take that agonizing risk anyway, kneading the black dough with trembling fingers, just to stop your daughter's whimpering. To silence her cries in the brutal 1315 winter, you spend hours boiling strips of tough leather from an old, discarded horse harness. You chew on the tasteless, rubbery mass until your jaw intensely aches. Desperate for any trace of meat, you scavenge the freezing mud for garden snails in 1315, boiling them furiously with stinging nettles, praying the sharp weeds won't tear your raw throat. Your stomach churns with silent fury when the village priest declares in 1316 that eating a scavenged, rotting rat on a Friday is a sin that will condemn you to hell. Wading through the square in 1316, the freezing mud sucks at your feet as a desperate kitchen maid silently slips a stolen, half-chewed dog bone into her apron. Down the muddy hill, she risks a brutal whipping in 1316 to smuggle moldy bread crusts out of the kitchen, pressing the filthy scraps into her mother's dirt-stained hands. To make a watery onion broth feel full, you secretly mix in handfuls of dry sawdust. You endure the crushing physical pain of knowing this coarse wood will slowly ruin your own digestive tract. In a profound act of desperate love in 1315, you carefully bleed your starving draft horse, frying the warm, metallic-smelling blood with oat husks for a moment of strength. You tremble as you overhear the Lord cap the price of ale in 1316. A greedy decree depriving your starving sisters of calorie-rich drink, quickly followed by a devastating royal edict banning brewing ale from wheat entirely. Then, the terrifying 1316 famine fever violently sweeps the damp huts. You spend exhausted nights wiping the burning foreheads of delirious mothers who use their dying breaths to beg you to watch their families. The deafening, unnatural silence of the 1316 spring terrifies you the most. There is absolutely no bird song in the damp morning air, because every single bird has been trapped and eaten. You catch a stray, emaciated dog near the manor walls in 1317, silently asking God for forgiveness as you butcher it in the freezing dark. A chilling dread settles deep into your bones as news arrives in 1317 that even the distant royal court is struggling for bread. This means absolutely no help is coming for the forgotten poor. A desperate 1317 petition from the weeping village mothers is completely ignored by the crown. This total abandonment breaks the human mind. Walking through the flooded parish, you find the muddy graveyard physically disturbed in 1317. Your heart shatters as you realize it wasn't wolves that dug up the freshly buried victims, but starving, delirious mothers from the next village. There is no dignity left. When a starved pauper dies in the muck in 1317, the visiting coroner cruelly demands you and the grieving widows pay a mandatory viewing fee, taking your very last hidden pennies. You watch helplessly in 1317 as toddlers' bellies swell grotesquely from severe malnutrition. You are forced to feed your weeping children a thick, suffocating gruel made largely of river clay and sawdust. As the midwife holds a frail, silent newborn in the freezing 1317 gloom, you sing a desperate, tear-choked lullaby about a warm summer. An eerie 1315 superstition claims the ceaseless rain is the weeping of drowned ghosts, making you shiver every time a cold drop hits the thatch roof. You know the truth. That summer is never coming. By the time the relentless rain finally pauses in 1318, you fall to your bruised knees in the suffocating mud. You weep silently as you realize the soil is simply too ruined, too barren to grow food for another endless year. The elderly women had whispered in 1315 that this famine was a permanent curse, leaving you terrified that your neighbor's paranoid, hungry eyes will turn on your family in the dark. Walking slowly through the 1316 churchyard, your body a hollow shell, you fight a fleeting psychological urge when looking at the toxic red berries of the yew tree, tempted to end your agonizing hunger permanently. Back in your freezing, empty hut, you kneel by a wooden flour barrel. A heartbreaking 1315 legend claims keeping a dried toad inside will magically multiply grains. A lie you cling to as you scrape your bleeding nails against the empty wood. In the pitch black of 1315, mothers bury eggs under their cold hearths, a forbidden pagan ritual they believe will trick the rotting soil. You hide a single, slightly damp wool blanket beneath your floorboards in 1316, a fierce maternal instinct driving you to protect your family's last fragile layer of warmth. History will only record the grand edicts of kings and the soaring prices of wheat. But in the darkest, coldest shadows of the 14th century, it is the unseen, unbreakable resilience of women that carries the impossible weight of human survival.